I call the member for Londonderry.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. I rise to make a contribution to the Electricity Network Assets Authorised Transaction and Cognate Bills, a piece of legislation rushed through this parliament set to foist a dud deal on the hard-working families of New South Wales. The privatisation of our electricity network, which will mean higher power bills for families right across New South Wales. Indeed, this is an issue that was raised with me time and time again during the recent state election, and that's why I rise today to oppose this bill, because I stand with the hard-working families of my electorate who will be hit the hardest by an increase in electricity prices. Let me make this clear. Any increase in power prices to the families of my electorate will make power bills nothing short of completely unaffordable, because since the Coalition came to office in 2011, the average household electricity bill has gone up by $629 per year. This is equivalent to an increase of 42.6%. On top of this, the government removed the regulated maximum price on power prices. The families of my community cannot stand any increase in the cost of electricity, and I will stand here each and every day and make no apology for that and fight against a tax on cost of living for the communities of Western Sydney. Because what we know about this plan is that no private company is going to lease these assets to put down power prices. No private company will lease government assets to make a loss. They acquire these assets to make money, and that is at the expense of the communities that we represent in this place. Private enterprise is not in the business of ensuring that power prices are affordable for working families, nor should they be. This is the job of government, a job that this government has failed to do. Indeed, we know from a similar experience in South Australia that privatisation has led to the highest electricity prices in the country in that state. And this comes off the back of similar promises made by this government that power prices will not increase under their plan for privatisation. The government talks about price guarantees, but we know that that ends in 2019. And then what happens? Well, what we do know is that you cannot trust the Coalition on power prices, end of story. Madam Assistant Speaker, it was only last year that the state government collected $1.7 billion in dividends from the electricity network. Let me say it again, $1.7 billion. This is money that we all know goes towards our schools, our nurses, our teachers, our hospitals, our police, our roads. And it's money that we know will come in each and every year, and it's money that goes towards paying for our state's frontline services.
Why did Labor want to sell it?
In my electorate of Londonderry, where families are just crying out for more money for Mount Druitt Hospital, Nepean Hospital, for air conditioning in local schools, for basic maintenance on social housing properties, what the government plans to do in this legislation is just to give away almost $2 billion a year, every year, for a century. Previous members opposite speaking in this debate have been asking where the independent criticism of their ill-funded plans are. Well, Madam Assistant Speaker, most members in this place will be well acquainted with that UBS report, which said that the state's fiscal position would be hurt in the long run from this deal. The government won't guarantee a sale price, so how do we know that they actually will even keep their grandiose infrastructure promises? So please forgive me if I'm missing something, but if the government doesn't know how much it's going to get from this deal, how can we even trust them to deliver the extravagant range of promises that they made in the election in each and every seat? The government's proposal involves spending all of the sale proceeds, so how will future services be funded? No wonder the Premier's office intervened to doctor the UBS report, because it exposes the dud deal for what it really is. Privatising our electricity, poles and wires means this money will go to private companies as profits instead of back to government to fund our public services. Madam Assistant Speaker, another great area of concern for me is the impact of this privatisation on those working in this network. The residents of my electorate have been asking me what this deal could mean for their jobs. Well, this legislation gives me no answer on this question. We heard the member for Blue Mountains cite the experience in Victoria of the loss of 8,000 jobs. The Premier promised in Victoria, the Premier promised in his media release of the 10th of June that, I quote, "The jobs of permanent award employees will be protected, but there's nothing in this bill to indicate that this really will happen. There's a compulsory transfer clause, but there's no explicit protection of jobs. No guarantee that once employees are transferred to the new entities, that they won't lose their jobs. If people's jobs are not being explicitly protected in this legislation, then I cannot, in good conscience, support this bill. I cannot support people, particularly from Western Sydney, potentially losing their jobs, when all members in this place know, I hope they do, that what we need in Western Sydney actually is more jobs, not less, to alleviate the crippling employment deficit that is ruining our region. How any member in this place from Western Sydney, can support this legislation is just incomprehensible to me. But what about this, Madam Assistant Speaker? How on earth can we expect the people of New South Wales to swallow this proposition holus bolus when the members of Mike Baird's cabinet are on record opposing this? Let's have a look at what the Minister for Education has said on this subject, because it appears that the Minister and I, well, we obviously have a lot in common. He said, "I know in my electorate, people have made it very clear that they don't want their local electricity poles and wires to be sold, and I agree with them." Well, I hope the Minister in the hallowed halls of the Cabinet Room has told the Premier about the concerns of the good people of Murray, who obviously have a lot in common with the good people of Londonderry. I say to you, Minister, come into this place, stand up for your constituents. You said it yourself, the people that own this don't want it sold. Madam Assistant Speaker, what about the grant half of the Baird Grant government? Leader of the Nationals, the member for Dubbo, who said, "We are currently opposed," is the Nationals' position, and as I've said when I've been asked this question, I'm not going to vote for anything that's a bad deal. I'm not going to vote for anything that is a bad deal for my electorate. Well, Deputy Premier, neither am I, because this isn't just a bad deal for my electorate, for your electorate, it's a bad deal for New South Wales. Madam Assistant Speaker, unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows this government likes to talk about its so-called mandate to deliver this dud deal for New South Wales. But let me finish by looking for a moment at the mandate of other members in this place. Particularly, let's look at the mandate given to 14 new opposition members of Parliament, occupying the seats previously held by the government. These are seats won from a government that took this very proposal to an election, with swings against the government parties of upwards of 15%. I'm proud to be part of a cohort of Western Sydney members who come to this place with overwhelming mandates from the people of their communities to fight against this dud deal. On election night, I told the people of Londonderry that I would fight for them in this Parliament. One of the biggest issues they have sent me here to fight against is the privatisation of our state's electricity assets, their electricity assets, and that is why I'm opposing this bill.
Madam Speaker.